That garage is worth scrap metal. The CEO laughed loudly. One strong wind and the whole thing collapses. The crowd laughed with him. Some laughed because they feared him. Others laughed because they wanted promotions. Only one person stayed silent. Daniel Reeves stood beside the old garage door holding the hand of his 8-year-old daughter Lily. His work shirt was stained with grease. His boots were worn down. His garage sign hung crooked above him with half the letters faded away. Reeves Auto Repair. People driving by barely noticed it anymore. But Daniel noticed everything. He noticed the mocking smiles. He noticed the phones recording him. And most of all, he noticed Lily squeezing his hand tighter. "Daddy," she whispered nervously. "Why are they laughing at us?" Daniel looked down at his daughter and forced a small smile even though humiliation burned through his chest like fire. "Because some people think money makes them smarter." Across the street, Ethan laughed even harder after hearing him. "You hear that?" Ethan shouted to the crowd. "The junkyard philosopher speaks." More laughter exploded. A younger mechanic from Ethan's luxury dealership walked closer to Daniel and shook his head. "You should just sell the place already. The city's demolishing this block next month anyway." Daniel's face darkened slightly. That part was true. Developers had been buying properties around the neighborhood for months. Fancy dealerships. Luxury apartments. Coffee shops where a single drink cost more than Daniel earned in an hour. The little garage was the last thing standing in the middle of it all. And Ethan wanted it gone badly. "Last chance," Ethan called out. "I'll give you 50,000 cash today for that pile of rust." The employees behind him whistled. 50,000 sounded huge. But Daniel knew the truth. The land beneath the garage was worth millions. Ethan thought he was desperate enough not to know. Daniel slowly stepped forward. His voice stayed calm. "You offered 50,000 because you think I'm poor." Ethan shrugged casually. "You are poor." Daniel smiled faintly. "Maybe." Then he turned away. The crowd expected anger. They expected shouting. Instead, Daniel calmly opened the garage door. The rusty metal screeched upward. And suddenly, the laughter stopped. Because inside the dark garage sat a car covered beneath a gray tarp. A shape. Low. Wide. Unmistakably expensive. Ethan's confident smile disappeared instantly. "What the hell is that?" Daniel ignored him and walked inside with Lily. The crowd followed carefully. Daniel grabbed the tarp. And pulled. Gasps erupted everywhere. Even Ethan stumbled backward. Because underneath sat a 1967 Ford GT40 Mark IV. Original. Perfect. Priceless. The entire garage went silent. One mechanic nearly dropped his phone. Another whispered, "No, no way." Everyone knew that car. Collectors would kill for one. Auction houses would start wars over one. And somehow, it was sitting inside the scrap metal garage. Ethan forced out a laugh, but it sounded weak now. "That's fake." Daniel said nothing. He simply opened the hood. The engine gleamed like art. Real parts. Original numbers. Authentic everything. One older mechanic stepped closer with trembling hands. "Oh my God!" He looked at Ethan. "It's real." The CEO's face lost color. "That's impossible." Daniel calmly wiped grease from his hands. "My father bought it in 1972 after a race team shut down. Spent 30 years restoring it." Lily smiled proudly. "Grandpa said Daddy finished the engine after he died." Nobody spoke. Because suddenly the poor single dad standing in dirty boots no longer looked poor at all. Ethan's jaw tightened. "How much do you want for it?" Daniel looked directly at him. "It's not for sale." Ethan stepped closer immediately. "Everything's for sale." "No. I'll pay $2 million." The crowd gasped again. $2 million. Daniel didn't blink. "No." Ethan's expression hardened dangerously. "You understand who I am?" Daniel nodded calmly. "You're a man who laughs at people before knowing their story." The silence that followed felt suffocating. Ethan stared at him with pure hatred now. Then his eyes shifted slowly around the garage. Old shelves. Old tools. Dusty walls. And suddenly, something clicked inside his head. A greedy thought. He smiled again. But this smile looked colder. "You still lose the property next month." Daniel's face finally changed. Slightly. There it is, Ethan whispered. That look right there. Lily held Daniel's arm tightly. What's he talking about? Daniel stayed quiet. Ethan stepped closer like a predator. The city inspection already happened. This building failed every safety code possible. In 30 days this dump gets demolished. The crowd murmured again. Daniel knew it was true. The garage needed massive repairs he couldn't afford. Ethan lowered his voice. You can't save it. Then he looked around dramatically. But maybe I can. Daniel narrowed his eyes. Ethan smiled wider. Sell me the property, and I'll let you keep the car. The offer sounded generous. But Daniel understood the trap immediately. Without the garage, he had nowhere to work. No income. No future. Just a famous car he'd eventually be forced to sell anyway. Daniel shook his head slowly. No deal. Ethan's expression turned ugly again. Then enjoy watching bulldozers crush your memories. He turned and walked away while his employees followed him. But before entering the dealership, he stopped one final time. Oh, and when the city takes this place apart. He smirked cruelly. I'll be there to watch. That night rain hammered the garage roof while Daniel worked silently beneath yellow lights. Lily slept on an old couch near the office with a blanket wrapped around her. The GT40 sat beside him like a sleeping beast. Daniel stared at the cracked ceiling above him. 30 days. That was all he had left. 30 days before everything disappeared. The garage wasn't just a business. It was his father's dream. It was Lily's second home. It was the only thing he had left after his wife died 3 years earlier. He couldn't lose it. But he also couldn't afford the repairs. A loud knock suddenly echoed through the garage. Daniel frowned. It was nearly midnight. He opened the door cautiously. And froze. An elderly man stood outside beneath the rain holding an umbrella. Daniel recognized him instantly. Victor Hale. One of the most powerful car collectors in America. The billionaire slowly smiled. I heard rumors today, Victor said softly. Rumors about a forgotten GT40 hidden in a dying garage. Daniel stayed cautious. It's not for sale. Victor chuckled quietly. I'm not here to buy the car. He looked around the garage carefully. Then his eyes landed on the engine Daniel had been rebuilding. His expression changed instantly. You rebuilt that yourself? Daniel nodded once. Victor stepped closer slowly like a museum visitor approaching a masterpiece. This work, he whispered. This is extraordinary. Daniel said nothing. Victor looked at him carefully now. What did you learn? My father. Victor stayed silent for several seconds. Then he asked something unexpected. Would you rebuild an engine for me? Daniel frowned. What kind of engine? Victor smiled faintly. A Ferrari 250 GTO. Daniel's eyes widened slightly despite himself. Even touching one was legendary. Victor continued. My restoration team failed 3 times. Nobody can solve the overheating issue. Daniel looked uncertain. I'm not miracle worker. Victor smiled again. Maybe not. But I watched the video from today very carefully. He glanced toward the GT40. People were staring at the car. Then he pointed toward Daniel's tools. I was staring at the craftsmanship. For the first time all day, Daniel felt something dangerous rise inside him. Hope. Victor pulled out a card and placed it on the table. If you succeed, I'll pay enough to restore this entire garage. Daniel stared at the card silently. Victor walked toward the door. But before leaving, he stopped. Oh, one more thing. Daniel looked up. Victor's eyes narrowed slightly. Ethan Cole already tried buying the Ferrari. Daniel frowned. And? Victor smiled coldly. I enjoy disappointing arrogant men. Then he disappeared into the rain. 3 weeks later, the entire city buzzed with rumors. Because inside the worthless scrap garage, something unbelievable was happening. Luxury cars lined the street outside daily. Collectors, investors, mechanics, even celebrities quietly visited. Word spread fast after Victor Hale publicly announced that Daniel Reeves had solved the Ferrari engine problem in 48 hours after experts failed for 8 months. Suddenly everyone wanted Daniel. And Ethan Cole hated every second of it. Inside his dealership office, he smashed a glass against the wall while employees stood frozen. How is this happening? He shouted. Nobody answered. Because nobody knew. Every day Daniel's reputation grew larger. Videos online exploded with millions of views. The genius mechanic hidden in a broken garage. The single dad billionaires are hunting. The man luxury dealerships tried to humiliate. People loved the story. Especially the part where Ethan laughed at him publicly. Now the internet mocked Ethan nonstop. Daniel ignored all of it. He only focused on work. But on the morning before the demolition deadline, everything collapsed again. A black SUV stopped outside the garage. 3 city officials stepped out. One handed Daniel an envelope. Immediate demolition order. Daniel's stomach dropped. That's impossible. I filed the repair extensions. The official avoided eye contact. The order came from higher up. Daniel knew instantly. Ethan. Lily walked outside just as the officials placed a bright red notice across the garage door. Demolition approved. Tomorrow morning. Lily's eyes filled with tears immediately. Daddy. Daniel couldn't speak. Across the street, Ethan stood outside his dealership smiling proudly while watching everything happen. Slowly, he began clapping. Mocking. Cruel. Employees joined him carefully. Daniel stared across the street with silent rage burning through him. Ethan shouted loudly enough for everyone to hear. Guess scrap metal stays scrap metal after all. Lily started crying harder. And something inside Daniel finally snapped. Not anger. Not desperation. Something colder. He slowly walked back inside the garage. Everyone watched silently. A minute later, the sound of an engine exploded through the street. Deep. Violent. Powerful. People turned instantly. Then the garage door opened. The GT40 rolled out slowly into sunlight. But it looked different now. Meaner. Alive. Daniel had finished it completely. The engine roared like thunder across the city block. Crowds gathered instantly. Phones appeared everywhere. Even Ethan's smile disappeared. Daniel parked directly in front of the dealership. Stepped out. And calmly opened the hood. The engine purred perfectly. Then he looked directly at Ethan. You know the difference between us? Ethan said nothing. Daniel's voice echoed across the street. You buy machines to impress people. He placed a hand on the GT40. I bring dead things back to life. The crowd erupted. People cheered loudly. Employees secretly smiled. Ethan looked furious. Then suddenly another convoy of black vehicles arrived. Luxury sedans. Security guards. Reporters. Everyone stared. Victor Hale stepped out first. Then several other billionaire collectors followed behind him. One reporter shouted immediately. Mr. Hale, is it true you're investing in Reeves Auto Repair? Victor smiled calmly. No. Daniel looked confused. Victor handed him a folder. I'm buying the entire block. The entire street went silent. Ethan stepped forward instantly. What? Victor ignored him completely. He looked at Daniel instead. The contract's finalized this morning. Daniel opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside sat ownership papers. Not just for the garage, but the entire surrounding property. Victor smiled slightly. You once rebuilt my Ferrari when nobody else could. He pointed around the street. So I rebuilt your future. Ethan looked like he'd been punched in the chest. That property was supposed to be mine. Victor finally looked at him. And that attitude is exactly why it never will be. The crowd exploded with cheers. Ethan's own employees looked embarrassed now. Some even walked away from him. Daniel stared at the papers silently. His hands trembled. Lily hugged him tightly while crying happy tears. Daddy, we're not losing the garage? Daniel finally smiled fully for the first time in years. No, baby. He looked around the old building. The cracked walls. The faded sign. The place everyone called worthless. Then he looked at Ethan. That garage was never scrap metal. Victor smirked beside him. It was hidden gold. Reporters rushed forward asking questions from every direction. Cameras flashed nonstop. But Daniel barely noticed any of it. Because Lily had wrapped her arms around him tightly. And for the first time since his wife died, the future no longer looked dark. Across the street, Ethan stood completely alone now. The internet would replay his laughter forever. His employees whispered behind his back. His reputation was collapsing publicly. Meanwhile, crowds surrounded Daniel's garage cheering loudly as engines roared around him. The same garage they mocked. The same man they laughed at. And standing beneath the broken old sign with grease still on his hands. The single dad everyone underestimated had shocked them all.